My name is Nathan, I'm a videographer, and this is a breakdown of the latest live stream that I did, which was a drag performance as a fundraiser. We got to do it in this little back part of the theater that had a bit of a rig up in the ceiling that I was able to make use of. I had 5 cameras, there were performances on stage, and hosts that were going to be bantering back and forth. The entire thing was live streamed. We had the entire afternoon to get set up, and we planned and talked about it for a few days prior. So you can see me setting up a couple of C-stands with some COB lights and softboxes. I use these to evenly and softly illuminate the hosts. Whenever I'm filming someone in drag, they don't really like to see a ton of shadows unless it's like super shadowy, and that's an intentional artistic plan because of the piece that they're doing. I wanted to evenly light the hosts with these lights because I didn't know where they were going to be standing, and if I kind of do it all like for one particular spot and they wander around, then everything that I did just kind of goes out the window and there's no point to it anyways. So the hosts and the performers were going to be doing a bit of like a banter back and forth after each number. I had to make sure that the cameras were oriented so that if you looked left towards the person that you're talking to on stage, they would look right at the camera facing them and actually would look right to the people watching at home. The worst thing is when you break the 180 rule on a live stream and it doesn't really make any sense because people already can't get like a sense of space for where you're filming. So it's really important to get that right so that it aligns in people's heads. I had a grid with LEDs and incandescents or tungsten lights for the performances. I didn't really worry too much about getting the white balance spot on every time because most of the time it was colored LED lights. The overall white balance was for 3200 for everything up on stage, and 5600 for the hosts because the 2 COBs that I had available to me were daylight balanced. The drag queens had like this little T-shaped stage that they could perform on, although it ended up being more like an L because one side had a Christmas tree on it, so I only really had to light the front and the back. I did have a camera operator who had a super close zoom lens, a 55 to 210 on a crop sensor next to a full frame 85mm for like a full stage wide shot. And this is what I use to capture expression. Expressions are really important to capture when you're streaming live because a one single wide shot from the back of the room or side of the stage, wherever you are, it just won't feel connected. If you're sitting there in the room looking at the camera thinking, this looks great, I can see everything, that's not what the viewers at home are feeling. They are disconnected already because they're not there. So you need to do everything possible to bring them into that moment. The lighting ended up being quite dramatic for some of those close-up face shots because it was all down lighting from the rig up in the ceiling. So for wide shots, you could see everything. There was color all over the place, but for close facial shots, depending on the makeup or hats or hair or whatever you had, it would be more or less dramatic. I'm gonna go off on a little tangent here because this isn't a real rule, but this has just been something I've found in my experience. Tungsten lights tend to not be linear. If you set a light to 40% on a dimmer and then you turn it up to 80%, it's not necessarily double the light output. Incandescent lights, just by their nature, tend to ramp up very quickly in the final 20 to 25%. So the safe zone, without it being super hot and like accentuating any kind of little hot spots, I like to live 80% or lower. With LED lights, sometimes they try to act like incandescents and they're deliberately programmed to follow the same kind of logarithmic curve. Other lights are more video focused and they actually have a linear curve so that 50% is double 25% in the output intensity. Not always the case, and I find that lights kind of fall apart in a sensor in that last 20%. So all of the stage lighting that I did was 80% or underneath on any given fixture. As you can see, there are actually different zones of colors. I didn't have the freedom to choose where the zone stopped and started, but I could control individual lights. With the time crunch that I had in the afternoon to get all of my cameras and lighting set up, I opted for using what a lot of the house system already had, which is usually not a bad thing to go for. But I did want to create a bit of variety, so we had multiple presets that I would cycle through. I think I had 8 preset looks in total, and as each performer would go, I might blend a couple of them together, but for the most part, it was a different look for each performer. Setting up the cameras was a little interesting because I had to think ahead to where any kind of action might or might not happen. We didn't have a live audience. We only had these little cutouts that were kind of positioned in seats. So what I'd do is I'd have like a top-down kind of shot to really show off any kind of action. If you were looking at it from the front, it might look a bit two-dimensional. I wanted to see a bit more 3D stuff, so to do that we had to move cameras into 3D space. Now, with limited operators, I mostly had static cameras to work with, so I wanted to try and set myself up to see anywhere the action would be happening. Quick tip, open up early on with a conversation whenever you're talking to a client with live streaming about how a camera does not see light the way that our eyes see light. You don't need to go much into detail. You just need to say that there's a difference. What you see with your eyes is not what we're going to see with the camera. So just get that idea out of your head that as soon as it looks good to you, it's going to look good on the camera. This just isn't really true. You need to use whatever medium is going to be broadcasting to the audience to be the deciding factor. If there's a live audience, then yes, you'd look at it and you decide whether or not it looks good. But because this is all live streamed, the cameras are the final say. I did just want to show you a little bit of the behind the scenes for how this production all came to play and what was involved with it. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I will be sending out more of these behind the scenes breakdowns in future. So if you like them, go ahead and subscribe, or just wait for someone to send you a video and be like, hey, check this out. This guy broke down how he did this stream or whatever, you know, do whatever you want. It's 2020, almost over. Bye.